Could this be my favorite Buffalo Trace product ever? Today we're diving into E.H. Taylor Small Batch. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So that's right, today we are diving into Colonel E.H. Taylor Small Batch from Buffalo Trace Distillery. For me, this is my first bottle that I've ever owned of E.H. Taylor, any of the lineup of E.H. Taylor, which is really exciting and super happy to get to dive in with you guys. I have had one pour of this just to let it open up, but this will truly be kind of first impressions for me. I was able to get this just as a gift, which is amazing and super grateful. In terms of price and availability though, this is typically one of the harder ones to find. In fact, Buffalo Trace as a whole is very difficult to find. Most of their stuff is extremely hyped up. So we've got a $45 MSRP here on E.H. Taylor, though you'll often see it for $60 plus, often veering toward $100, and availability is, again, pretty low, pretty difficult to find. Though I will say this is the small batch product of the E.H. Taylor line, which is much more widely available than, say, the single barrel or the barrel strength or the warehouse C. All of those are much more limited. So if you are looking for something from E.H. Taylor and from Buffalo Trace, this is one of those staples that you might be able to find. It's actually one of the 4 or 5 products that are in constant rotation at the distillery, so if you're going on a tour, hopefully it lines up that maybe you can get something like an E.H. Taylor or a Blanton's that day, which would be really nice. Since this is my first time diving into E.H. Taylor, just a bit about who E.H. Taylor was in his own right. It says here on the back that he was a founding father of the modern bourbon industry. He left an indelible legacy. His dedication to distilling began at the close of the Civil War when he purchased OFC Distillery and developed some innovative techniques that are still in use today. So I know that Buffalo Trace loves to honor the people who have had a major legacy on their history. I believe OFC transitioned to Buffalo Trace. And then they also just like to honor the people who have sort of pushed the bourbon industry forward. One differentiating factor here to keep in mind with Colonel E.H. Taylor Small Batch is that this is thought to be from mash bill number 1 over at Buffalo Trace, which is their low rye mash bill. That also includes like Buffalo Trace bourbon itself and Eagle Rare, I believe. So this is on that side of things with low rye. I think Blanton's is the high rye. So just as a point of comparison there. In terms of this bottle itself, we've got a bottled in bond product, meaning it's at least 4 years old and it's 100 proof. Though that 4 years, I have been told, is somewhere really closer to 6 or 7 years for this product, which is great. And then small batch just means that some number of barrels were combined together. I'm not exactly sure for E.H. Taylor how many that is. Would love to hear in the comments below if you do know how many barrels or how big the batches are here. And then last but not least, from my understanding, what differentiates this from others in the mash bill number 1 is that this is just taken from warehouses that E.H. Taylor himself helped build and constructed while he was there as, I guess, master distiller, which is a cool legacy. All right, all that being said, the big question always with Buffalo Trace is it worth the hype and all the crazy amount of attention it gets? Let's find out. All right, so E.H. Taylor on the nose here. Very sweet. Lots of vanilla. A good fruity bouquet too, like lots of apple, a little bit of pear. Cherry note that I get pretty often on Buffalo Trace products. A little bit of like an orange citrus peel kind of thing going on, so that's an interesting layer. Good amount of oak. It's a little bit more light and effervescent and fruity than I was expecting, but it's still got some nice backbone of like butterscotch and caramel too. And oak, like I mentioned. Really nice nose, a little bit of an ethanol punch there, a little bit of alcohol presence, so maybe not super expected for 100 proof, but adds an extra punch and flavor to it. All right, let's go in on the nose, everybody. Cheers. Man, I really enjoy that. In fact, the word I would use there to describe that is just, it's an enjoyable sip. Really, really nice. Good amount of that vanilla, good amount of honey. So I'm getting more of like a honey and even like a floral aspect to this. So it's coming through with some of those things that I'm more used to getting with rye, to be honest with you, which is surprising. Though, again, there's still that like butterscotch and caramel note with a good flash of oak. And then toward the back end, I think spice really rises up here, like a cinnamon spice that's lingering on the palate. Let's go back in for a second sip, though, and see if we can pick out some more flavors. Cheers, everybody. Nice. Again, really enjoyable. That sip went a little bit darker for me, so a little touch of a nuttiness, something like a hazelnut, and then a little bit of oak as well, and even a little bit of like raisin, so a darker cherry or raisin kind of note going on there compared to the first sip, which was more like vanilla honey. This one went a little bit darker with like some nut and raisin mixed in, which shows good balance, and all of the sweetness really mixes well with that oak, so really enjoying it. Let's go in for a third sip, evaluate that finish and that spice kick that I keep getting coming up here. Cheers, everybody. Yep. Another very nice sip. And again, more layers that I am picking out here. I got more of that apple and pear coming through on that sip. So the fruit forward nature came through there that I was getting on the nose more. A little bit of that honey came back. But this time I got more of like a nice brown sugar and almost like vanilla frosting kind of note. So nice and sweet. A little bit like a cinnamon bun because it's got a little bit of that cinnamon kick on the back end too. I don't think that the finish is particularly long here. I think it's actually tending toward like medium, which is okay. I think it's more of an enjoyable sip that you want to keep coming back to anyway. But what I do get on the finish is, again, a little bit of that apple, a little bit of that like cinnamon bun frosting kind of note, and a good amount of that actual cinnamon itself with some spice and maybe some black pepper in there. So a nice balanced sip with good complexity for me. Nice nose that welcomes you in with that sweetness. Little bit of an ethanol punch. And not the longest finish in the world, but because it's so enjoyable, I just kind of want to go right back in and get another sip. All right, everybody. So my final thoughts here on E.H. Taylor Small Batch. Really, really nice. I mean, super enjoyable, super pleasant on the palate, and just sort of warm. Mouth feels pretty good, pretty solid. Finish isn't super long, but the nose and the sweetness of the palate really invite you back in. I think there's enough here to keep you interested as you keep sipping through it. So really, really nice there. Honestly, for me, this one feels nice and balanced, but it's got a little extra flair with each sip, just something a little bit new and different to bring to the table, which is great. Though the core elements there, that like honey, vanilla, fruitiness, a little bit of cinnamon spice, and some oak. I mean, that's just a solid base for pretty much any bourbon. So count me in as a big fan of E.H. Taylor. I'm gonna have to compare this to some of my other Buffalo Trace products, but in my head, this is right up there at the top of the list. I think that this is a good combo of sort of what I like best in Blanton's, Buffalo Trace bourbon, and Eagle Rare. So if I kind of take elements from each of those and combine them together, something like Colonel E.H. Taylor might emerge, which we're gonna have to compare again to see if that's true. But that's kind of what's going on in my head. Is like, this is a nice combo of a lot of different things that I've tasted from Buffalo Trace. And then in terms of price and whether or not it's worth it to go out and spend a lot and hunt for this, I definitely think it's worth looking for. If you find it for 45 to 60, maybe even 70 bucks, I'd say definitely go out and grab it. If it's more than 70 bucks, if it's veering toward that $100, I'd hesitate on this one and think there's a lot of other things that you could explore in the bourbon world. But for me, if you see this at MSRP, it's 100% a recommend. And even for 25 bucks or so over MSRP, I'd say it's still worth it. All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Let me know in the comments below what you think of E.H. Taylor and how it fits in your evaluation of the Buffalo Trace lineup, especially those more staple or core products. While you're at it, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Would love to have you aboard for the rest of the journey through 2023 and beyond. Until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.